Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. All right. Well, folks, thank you all very much for being here. My name is Tom Golden, City Manager in Lowell. We appreciate it. We gave everyone a few extra minutes to get here to have a piece of pie and a little bit of water. So we're gonna kick this off today. This is a listening session that we'd like to push forward in the future to let people have an idea of how municipal budgets are put together. There may not be all of the information because Connor Baldwin, who is the CFO for the City of Lowell, is we're still working on it currently right now with Austin Ball, who is the Assistant CFO. I also want to take the opportunity to introduce the Assistant City Manager, Sean Machado, who is over here to my left, and also ARPA, what's the correct term?
Finance Director.
ARPA
Director.
ARPA Finance Director, Brendan Flynn. If anyone's had the opportunity, Brendan, he is all things ARPA, all $76 million. And trying to stay within the confines. So with this municipal budget session, what we'll probably try to do right out of the gate, the CFO is going to fire through some of what is probably 20 slides or so,
Sure.
and then open it up to a Q&A afterwards, if that's okay? Everyone agree to that?
Sounds great.
Maybe we can all do a little push-pull. We're doing this with the City Council as well as other folks in the city, and it's just a different approach. So feel free to ask any questions at the end, and we'll try to get them answered the best we can.
Great.
Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So, first and foremost, thank you all very much for coming. It's great to see everybody here this evening interested in this type of this topic. We really want to get the community involved, and so this is sort of a first of its kind. The format is very flexible, so we've prepared a presentation, intend to walk through some information, but at any point, stop me if you have questions. We want this to be conversational. We're going to touch on a lot of different topics, so everything from where the money comes from, where the money goes, some of the capital stuff. We'll talk a little bit about ARPA, as the manager mentioned. Mr. Flynn is here. So very wide-ranging, but we want to allow some time for you all to ask us your questions, or feel free to jump in at any point. So without further ado, you met the city manager at the beginning, Tom Golden. My name is Connor Baldwin. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. Austin Ball is my Deputy CFO. I've been with the city for about 14 years, CFO since 2014. Done the budget a lot of times. Hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Every year comes equipped with its own unique set of challenges, but there are a lot of things in a gateway city like Lowell that are common themes year to year. If any of you have been paying attention for some period of time, you'll see a lot of the same themes recurring in terms of our challenges. So without further ado, we'll get right to it. So the agenda for this evening is on the screen here. We're just going to cover some basics. We're going to go the budget overview, sort of back to front, talk a little bit about the history. I want to focus on how the budget is developed, so cradle to grave, how the budget comes to pass, and then how all of you and the folks at home that might be viewing this later are able to engage. Coming here tonight is obviously one way to get involved, but there are a lot of other opportunities before the budget is passed, and we want to talk about that. And at the end, we're going to leave some time for question and answer, and then to hear from you if you have suggestions for this year's budget, for this year's capital plan, or for the budget in general, or any other questions you may have, so that we have some time to talk about those. So jumping right in to the basics, we want to talk about how we think about the budget. So there's three sort of key elements to how we approach the budget. It's values focused. So we try to make this an inclusive process. This particular initiative, bringing this to the folks here at Middlesex tonight is one way, but we try through the council meetings, through social media, through various other channels to involve the community. But it's also based on plans that the city has laid forth in other areas. And you see the photo over to the right is a graphic from the Lowell Master Plan. Some of you are likely familiar with this. But through these other processes, mainly run through our planning and development department, there's a lot of public outreach that happens. And so particularly through the Lowell Forward 2040 master plan, there was a very comprehensive public outreach strategy that pulled in a lot of input from the community, a lot of priorities from the community. And so we take those documents as guiding sort of beacons for the city, and we try to allocate resources to achieving those goals that we pull out of the master plan. So the key the principles in the budget process: the city manager, the city council, and the residents. So number two, the fiscal health. This is obviously a key component of the budget. The spending decisions are strategic and tied to financial metrics and sustainability. And then number three, effective government. We want to focus on efficiency and core services. So let's talk about the budget generally. So one thing that is common to municipal finance, and municipal finance in Massachusetts is very unique. It's a lot different than private finance or even municipal finance in other states. There's a particular set of laws that govern the process, that govern how we spend money, how we collect money, and we'll talk about a little bit of that, but if anyone is interested, I'm happy to dive more deeply into that. So our major revenue sources that make up the budget, number one, are taxes, and that can mean a couple of different things. So there's real estate taxes that come from your homes, personal property taxes. Those are things essentially not attached to the ground. So you think about a business, maybe they're copiers or pieces of equipment, machinery that a business might own. Those are personal property. There's also excises on motor vehicles, boats, etc. Those round out sort of the tax category. For Lowell, one of our biggest revenue sources, in sort of proportionally, this is like 2/3 versus 1/3. So 1/3 being 1/3 of our total revenue coming from taxes, 2/3 from state aid. State aid meaning, you see that acronym there, UGA, unrestricted general government aid. This is the aid we get from the Commonwealth every year in the state budget that is unrestricted and can be used for any purpose, and that covers police, fire, etc., public works, all of those things. And then we have Chapter 70. Now, this is likely the type of aid that folks might be most familiar with. Chapter 70 means education aid. So this is aid that goes directly to the schools. It comes from the state. Essentially, it passes through the city to the schools. There is an appropriation made in the city council appropriation order that goes directly to the school department. And then we have this category that we call local receipts, and that's essentially everything else. So fines, permits, fees, anytime you essentially go to City Hall and make a transaction for anything other than taxes, we call those local receipts. And so I skipped over this, but I'll kind of bring this back to the concept of the general fund. So on one side you have the revenues, on the other expenditures, and we think about costs and what are the cost components of things that the budget pays for. And there's a lot of those in a $580 million total budget, but we break them down into, there's statutory categories, so these are sort of outlined in the general laws of the Commonwealth. Staffing, we call that personal services. That's for any salaries and wages, but that's split up into all different cost types. So permanent salary and wages, overtime, different pay types within different departments like shift differential, etc. Supplies and services, we call those ordinary expenses of the departments. And then the third is special items or capital, and that's sort of in a different category because the way we pay for that is different. And I'll touch on that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the Lowell High School project as a way to illustrate how capital is financed. But essentially, as a municipality, we can borrow money for certain things. The way we raise that is by selling general obligation bonds out to the market, and then the money that we receive from the banks we use to finance projects for the public good. So the general fund is the main operating fund of the city. It is essentially what we mean when we talk about the budget, but there are a lot of other types of funds. And this is, this presentation and this course here is more of a 101. If we wanted to get deeper into those other ones, that's more of a 201 or a 301 and talking about all the different types of funds. But they're outlined there on the side. We have things known as revolving funds, enterprise funds, which you may have heard of that. Those are business type activities of the city. The city of Lowell operates our water utility, our wastewater utility, and the parking department as enterprise funds. The essence of the enterprise funds is that the fees you set pay for the total cost of the operation. And so everything from the debt, the capital improvements for sewer, as well as the staff of the sewer department, the ordinary expenses, the chemicals that they use, the projects that they do, the fees that you pay in your water bill for sewer, those go to fund the entirety of the operation in the sewer enterprise fund. There are lots of different types of special revenue funds. Just sort of picking one off the top of my head, we have one these are all set out in the general laws, but one for sale of cemetery lots. And so if you were to purchase a lot in one of the city's public cemeteries, the money that you pay for the space goes into a special fund that can only be used for the upkeep of the cemetery. That's, so you can take that concept as sort of what special revenue funds are all about. Then we have capital project funds. So when we finance capital and when we sell those bonds for those capital projects, we account for those in capital project funds. The expenses that live in the capital project fund are related to that capital project, and then we borrow the money to pay it back. We also have various trust and agency funds. So trust funds are things, we have an OPEB, other post-employment benefits, trust fund. We have certain gifts and bequests to the city. So sometimes, wealthy benefactors in the city, when they pass away, they'll leave money to the city, and they'll either, set up a trust that can be used for certain expenditures, and sometimes there's a separate fund where the interest on the principal that they give us can be spent for, like the library. The library has a lot of trust funds. And then there are agency funds, which are essentially the city holding money for other purposes. So an example of that are special details, because we hold the money from private details for police, and then when the police work the detail, we pay the police officer. So it's a little more complicated. I'm oversimplifying, but again, if you want to come back for the 201 class, that I'd be happy to get into the details there. So there's a few basic concepts that are important to remember when thinking about the budget, especially in Massachusetts. Number one is that budgeting in Massachusetts is pretty restrictive, so there are only certain things that we can spend money on. There are only certain ways that we can raise money from the residents or from businesses. We are required by law in Massachusetts to pass a balanced budget, so the revenues have to meet the expenditures. That is not something that applies to like the federal government or even all states for that matter. But in Massachusetts, every year when the city council approves the budget, or the city manager presents the budget to the city council, that is a balanced budget. So all of the revenues are estimated to meet all of the expenses of the year. It's important, capital planning is a key component of the budget. It is a sort of a sister to the budget process. There is a relationship in the debt service that is paid on capital projects. But those are for the big things. Those are for bridges and for roads and for sidewalks and park improvements, etc. That's what we talk about when we think of capital planning. And then number 4, which perhaps is the most important, is transparency and accountability. So with the budget is more than just a document with a bunch of numbers in it. It's a communication tool to the public. We want it to be transparent. We want it to be accountable. We want people to know how the money is being spent, what it's being spent on, and the budget is the way to find those things out. It also includes goals, goals of the city council, goals of the city manager, and how those spending decisions are achieving those goals. So let's be a little more specific. What are some of the fiscal challenges for Lowell? These are not in any particular order, but one of our challenges coming into fiscal year 2025 And I guess backing up a little bit, in Massachusetts, the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we are right up in the waning days of FY24, about to present the council with the budget plan for FY 2025. One of the challenges that we're going to be talking a lot about over the next few years is increased debt service. So one of the major drivers, and there's a chart later on to sort of illustrate this, is the debt service from the high school. There's a $380+ million capital project to renovate and add a new component to the Lowell High School in the downtown. The debt service from that is just about to start coming online in its fullest. So we've financed that to meet our cash flow moving forward, but that is going to be a challenge for the city moving forward. Number two, for the last several years, in order to mitigate the impact on taxes, we've had to use our stabilization funds to balance the budget. And we've been able to replenish those reserve funds every year. So that's, year over year, we've never drawn on reserves, but we've essentially had to use them to plug the revenues each year. So we've seen an increase in fixed costs, namely for retirement, for insurance. While it's not exactly a fixed cost, we call them cherry sheet assessments. This is something we talk a lot about. The sort of funny story there, cherry sheet, we call them cherry sheets because in the 70s and 80s, when the state used to give communities their local aid estimates, they'd give it to you on a red piece of paper, sort of a cherry-colored piece of paper. So we still call them cherry sheets. On one side of the sheet was your local aid, so your Chapter 70 or unrestricted aid. On the other side of the sheet was your assessments. So those categories are things like the LRTA assessment, mosquito control. So every time we spray for mosquitoes, that's an assessment to the state. But the largest single cherry sheet assessment that is a challenge for Lowell is the assessment for charter schools. And as the charter school on Middlesex Street has expanded grades, that's been an increased cost to the city. So declining aid from the federal government, that is particularly about ARPA. So we are coming up at the end of this calendar year on the deadline to obligate the ARPA funds. There is a deadline of December 31st, 2026 to spend the funds, and then they will be gone. So we have tried to prioritize one-time expenses, but we have also financed things that are recurring costs. And so examining those, prioritizing those, are they needs of the city? Do we want to keep paying for them? That is something that the community is going to have to decide over the next few years. Going down the line, the increased net school spending, and this is a sort of a component of the Student Opportunity Act. So several years ago, the legislature enacted a comprehensive landmark piece of legislation to increase funding to districts, especially gateway cities like Lowell. One of the things that did, it gave a lot of additional Chapter 70 money to the communities, but it also increased what we call the minimum required contribution, which is as part of the Chapter 70 formula, and again, come back for the 201 class for more on that. The required minimum contribution is the amount that the municipality must meet to meet this concept known as net school spending. So there is a figure every year that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education puts out and says, City of Lowell, you have to spend, and I'm making the number up, $280 million on your school district. City of Lynn, City of Holyoke, Town of Chelmsford, Town of Tewksbury, you have to spend X, Y, and Z, and that is called net school spending. If you meet it or you're above it, great, but if you do not meet your net school spending requirement by the state, they will take any amount. So let's say, for example, you miss it by $1 million or some amount. They will tack that $1 million on to your net school spending requirement for the next year. So you always have to catch up year over year. The City of Lowell for the last several years, since about 2012, has met or exceeded the net school spending requirement. That's a testament to the City Council's commitment to education. but it's been a challenge, for gateway cities like Lowell, some of our neighbors in the Commonwealth, to keep up with those rising requirements. And then finally, and this is sort of a note on good financial management, increasing our reserves and our financial position is a priority of the administration, of the city council, but balancing all of these other financial challenges while still putting money aside. This is just like your household. You need to have money in reserves, which impacts your credit rating, which has a direct impact on the interest rate if you go to borrow money. We talked about all the money that we're borrowing for the Lowell High School project. We want to have a good interest rate on that. These together make up the whole of the challenges for Lowell. So, before we kind of dive a little deeper into property taxes, I want to ask if there's any questions at this point. Okay, so let's talk about taxes. So, in Massachusetts,
Sorry.
oh, please.
Richard, what's our bond rating? What's the city's bond
So,
rating?
and I'll say it again because I'm not sure if they can hear on the recording, but the city's bond rating, we get rated by several different agencies, and not to conflate the issue, but from Standard & Poor's, which is the one we use most frequently, AA plus is our credit rating. We typically will issue what are called state qualified bonds, and there's Chapter 44A of the general laws is the State Qualified Bond Act. It's a good tool for municipalities, especially gateway communities like Lowell, to, I'll say, tag on to the state's credit rating. And so what we do in order to achieve that, we have to appear before the Municipal Finance Oversight Board at the state, and then we're able to use the state's rating as a way to get a better interest rate. And the reason I say Standard & Poor's is because they use a different rating system for S&P versus Fitch and Moody's, and so AA plus is the rating that we have. And so to dive into, great question, thank you. Proposition 2.5 is probably something that you have some familiarity with. It was a law that was passed in 1980 where the state sort of said that every community had to value their properties at 100% of full and fair cash value. And that, it made a big difference at the time because not all communities were doing that. The assessments were a little bit all over the map. It's a little before my time, so I won't speculate as to why that was. But there are two major components to Prop 2.5, the law that was passed in 1980. Number one is that your tax levy can never be more than 2.5% of the total valuation of the community. And then year to year, and there's a caveat to the second component, you can't raise the levy more than 2.5%. However, it's important to kind of note this concept of what's called excess levy capacity. So, as I mentioned, year to year you can't raise the levy more than 2.5%, but if in any year you don't do that, or you raise the levy less than 2.5%, so let's say, for example, next year we raise taxes by 1%. That extra 1.5% doesn't go away. It gets, and this is sort of like a balance sheet item, it gets sort of socked away into this concept called excess levy capacity, which builds over time. And it's relevant, and sort of in particular in the Lowell example, over many years the city built up this excess levy capacity amount. And so when you would hear that the city were taxing 3.5% or some amount over the 2.5%, that eats into that amount of excess levy capacity. So you may ask yourself, how much excess levy capacity is there? Well, right now, going into FY25, there's $12.5 million in excess levy capacity, which essentially is the money that's left on the table, so to speak, that the city could tax but is not. And so the levy limit, there are sort of two components to this. The levy limit would be the maximum amount that the city could tax. That's the $184.9 million at the top. And then the FY24 tax levy, which was the amount, and when I'm going to say tax levy a lot and just sort of assume you know what I'm talking about, but the tax levy is the total amount in revenue that the city pulls in from everybody's property taxes, real estate, personal property, and that total is $172.4 million. So there's a chart there, and we'll make all of this information available online if any of this, you want to come back to this at another point. So how does that stack up against the other communities in Massachusetts? So Lowell's average single-family tax bill in 2024 was $5,365, statewide $7,400. So there's if you're ever interested, I would point you to the Division of Local Services. Has a great website. They have a great, it's called the Technical Assistance Bureau. A lot of great information, good charts. This chart in particular, it outlines the top 10 highest average single-family tax bills, with Weston being number one, and then the top 10 lowest single-family tax bills with Hancock, and I don't know where Hancock is. Do you, Austin?
I don't know where Hancock is.
Okay. It's Austin and I have this sort of running joke because there are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. There's always one that I've never heard of before, but Austin knows a lot more of them than I do, being from Western Mass. So let's talk specifically about FY 2025. So we are, as I mentioned before, wrapping up the budget. We'll be bringing the budget to the council on May 21st. I'll talk specifically about the process in a few moments, but in the pie chart, how does that get divvied up? So local aid is $288 million of our budget, and the lion's share of that is the Chapter 70 funding. So this is broken down into two. I mentioned the tax levy, which is both the real property and then personal property. The real property component of the tax levy is $167 million, which is about a third. And then we have all of these other categories, and I won't go through them one by one. But the all of these are sort of the local receipts kinds of revenues that I was talking about at the beginning. And then on the other side of the equation is our budgeted expenses, and you can see that green bar that sticks out further than the others. That is for education. So that is for the Lowell Public Schools. We also, in that number, include the assessment for the Greater Lowell Technical High School, as well as the Essex Agricultural High School. So there are a number of students, not a big number, and 5 students in Lowell that go to Essex Aggie, and we're assessed by that regional school the same way that we are for the Greater Lowell Technical High School. The other categories, so state assessments is what I talked about. Those are the cherry sheets. That's charter schools, it's the LRTA, etc. General government is sort of the everything else. So that's like all the departments in City Hall, my office, city manager's office, the tax collector, all the other finance departments, planning and development, etc. Public safety, which is the red bar, that's police and fire, as well as I think we categorize inspectional services, although technically they're part of DPD, but they serve a public safety function, and so they get categorized that way for reporting purposes. And then the blue is the public works. So that is the street. So public works is a large department. It's made up of a number of divisions. It's the streets, the lands and buildings, facilities, engineering. We have a newly created sustainability division of DPW, engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And then we categorize separately down at the bottom debt service, and that's debt service for all of the, for the general fund as well as the water, wastewater, and parking departments. So, how does the budget get, what is the budget process? How does the budget get put together? I mentioned how the master plan is sort of the guiding principles of how we think about what we want to do, how we want to achieve our mission. Community input is very important. So the budget is not just a one-time, point-in-time process. It's a year-long process. So through the course of community meetings, city council meetings, input from the city council, we're always receiving that input, using that to make spending decisions. And then, throughout the year from the council specifically through their meetings, and these two really go hand in hand. the community input and the council priorities, those help us define what the budget is, what are the priorities of the budget. So we pass the budget, and then how do we, what happens after that? The budget gets passed, we start spending the money, but we manage and measure the performance. We hold ourselves accountable through various reporting that we have to do, either to the state, to the community, to the city council, various requests that come in, and that's sort of how the process works. So to be a little bit more specific about the process and what that looks like, so these things are all governed by state laws. Chapter 44 of the general laws, section 31A, and section 59 of chapter 41 require department heads to submit budget estimates, both their expenditures and revenues for the next fiscal year. So I find that this is something that is often misunderstood by the public. It's really the department heads that start the budget process by telling us what they want for the next year and what is the total cost to provide a level service budget. So in order to perform the same level of service to the residents, to provide the same services, what is that going to cost? And so all of those figures come in, and I'll show a chart that outlines the process to the budget department, to Mr. Ball, and myself, sometime in the early winter, so January, February. Those department heads from the DPD commissioner, the director of DPD assistant manager, the director of Health and Human Services, they tell us what they need for the next year. We take that all together, we analyze our revenues and the estimates for the next year, and then we try to, it has to balance, like I said in the beginning. And then we analyze what, if any, impacts will there be on services. And that's really where the city manager comes in, myself, assistant city manager, the deputy CFO. We drill down into those budget requests to see, is there going to be any impact on service? And then we have a series of meetings and hearings with these department heads and come to agreement on the spending decisions for the next year. So, to kind of lay that out on the timeline and to show you where we are and where we're going for fiscal year 25. So I mentioned that it really all starts, especially for Lowell, where so much of our revenue is dependent on the state. It starts in January when the governor releases the state budget. So right after that happens, Mr. Ball will submit the instructions to the department heads asking for their requests in accordance with the law. They have about a month to get them back to us. They know this is coming every year round, so this isn't necessarily a surprise. We like to wait to get a better picture of the revenue from the state. So sometime in April, that's when we see the budget from the House Ways and Means. There's still more to happen after that, but that gives us a better look at what our local aid estimates are going to be for the next year. And so after that, we start meeting with the department heads, making those fine adjustments to their budgets, etc. So that kind of brings us to today and where we are right now. Our plan from here, and this is just a couple of weeks away, so on May 21st, the city manager will deliver to the city council the FY 2025 operating budget and the capital plan for next year. We anticipate that there will be at least one, if not a series of public hearings that will occur on June 4th. And then July 1, we start FY 25 and the whole thing starts all over again. So, how can you get engaged with the process? So like I said, coming here tonight or watching this is a great way to start. We'd love for you to be more engaged, and it's very important to us because this has to happen no matter what. And so the more input we have, the more the administration feels we're being responsive to the community. And so starting on May 22nd, I put Austin's email up here. Please send us emails about what you think. I'm just cbaldwin@lowellma.gov. Happy to give you my card or talk more about this with you if you'd like. If you don't have email, give us a call, 978-674-4402. Tell us what you think. Something like this in a forum, maybe you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. Give us a call. We'd be happy to talk to you. You can always come and, some people like to come and testify in front of the city council. Some people don't feel comfortable with that. That's perfectly fine. Everyone is welcome. It's a public hearing on June 4th, 7 o'clock in the city council chambers, second floor of City Hall. Everyone is welcome. It's open to the public. We'll advertise that in the newspaper. But again, if you don't feel comfortable coming and want to send us a message with your thoughts, please feel free to do so. Our partners at LTC will be broadcasting the meeting as they do all the city council meetings. So, if you just want to watch, please watch. It's on Channel 6. It's also on LTC and their YouTube channel. We want everyone to be involved as much as possible. So I want to talk a little bit more specifically again about some of our specific challenges for next year and sort of what's on the horizon. And first and foremost, trash and recycling. So one of the things, and this chart kind of outlines this, we made a very short presentation to the city council a couple of meetings ago about what's been going on with trash, and I could go on about this for a long time, but to save you, we are coming to the end of our current contract with our hauler, Waste Management for trash and for recycling. So we entered into that contract somewhere around 2018, 2019. We'll be coming to the end, and so we'll be renegotiating a contract either with Waste Management or with some other company for the hauling piece of solid waste and recycling. And there's two cost components to that. We have to pay somebody to come pick it up, and then we pay a separate company to dispose of it. And that's Wheelabrator is the name of the vendor we use to dispose of the trash, not the recycling. But what we've seen, and for any of you that have been paying attention to the city council meetings, this will sound redundant, but what happened in the economy in the 2018-19 period was that overseas companies like China stopped accepting recyclable materials from the United States. It really dried up the market for companies like Waste Management to sell these things overseas. And so that cost has been pushed back along to communities, and we've seen, number one, recycling used to be free. It used to be, the municipal thing that was sort of encouraged by all means necessary to the community. There is a cost now to the city, number one, but number two, and maybe more importantly, is we have this recycling contamination cost. So what I mean by that is when people put trash in the recycling container, we have to pay for that. And the way that Waste Management sort of charges us is we have an audit every so often. And this is if you ever, we've put information out about this. It's interesting to me. I won't imagine to anybody else, but they do an audit where they'll pick a bunch of barrels from a number of different communities, dump them all out, pick through them, and then they'll apply a percentage based on the percentage of things that don't belong in the recycling to the city, and then they'll bill us at that percentage forward until the next audit period. And so the sort of confluence of those two factors, the recycling contamination, the increase in cost of the commodity, have caused that red bar, which is the cost, to increase dramatically. So that's one side of the equation. The other, the trash fee for the city of Lowell has remained flat since 2008. So since 2008, we have all paid $125 a year for our trash, for somebody to come and pick up our trash and recycling every week, every other week for recycling and yard waste, etc. And it's not keeping pace with costs. So that is something that we're looking to propose some remedies to the city council. And I think, this is something we've talked about for a very long time, but it's sort of gotten to the point where, the difference between these two lines is essentially the subsidy that the general fund pays, so that the taxpayers pay. So we're all paying for it anyways. This $5 million delta, we'll be looking to adjust the fee, because it should be a fee that maybe doesn't cover the entirety of the cost, but at least provides some relief to the general fund, because it's squeezing other areas of the budget. And so that is going to be something we're going to be talking a lot about over the next few weeks with the council and the budget. So the Lowell High School project. So I mentioned in the beginning I was going to talk a little bit about capital. What better project to talk about than the Lowell High School project? You know, what I'm showing on the screen here is one of the latest budget summaries that we received from Skanska, our owner's project manager. I would invite you know, all the folks here tonight as well as the public at home to view the school building committee meeting. So every other month, a committee, the school building committee, meets to meet with the owner's project manager, the architect, the construction company, Suffolk, to go over issues that arise during the construction as well as to update the budget. And so this is a high-level summary of the costs associated with that project. The total project budget is at the bottom there, $381.9 million. It's broken out into categories above, and sort of just to point you to a few sort of items of note. To date, and this is in the left box here, so that $381 million is not all on the city. This is a cost that is being, we have a large grant from the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, that is paying for, you know, a lot of times we'll throw out this sort of 80-20 number, which is generally the way that it's talked about, but there, you know, it depends on eligible costs, so it's a little bit more complicated than that in terms of the effective, what's known as the effective reimbursement rate. But to date, we've received $128 million from the School Building Authority, and that's something, I mean, communities like Lowell, gateway cities, would be unable to undertake these large construction projects for schools if it weren't for agencies like the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So we're grateful to them for that. You'll notice that we've been invoiced to date $193 million. The difference between that is what we call the local share. And we finance that by selling bonds. And that debt service is what we talked about at the beginning as one of our challenges. As it comes online, it will have to be absorbed by the budget. So one of the things, this just popped into my head, but I spent a lot of time talking to crowds like this about the high school project in 2014 and 15. One of the things that is notable is that, you know, we didn't finance the whole project all at once. So as we spend the money, we've been issuing bonds, and that's why we haven't felt the full impact of the project yet to date. But as we, you know, the project is scheduled to end in August 2026. And so by that point, we will have financed the whole project. And at that point, the full sort of weight of the debt service will be felt by the residents. So when we talked back in the 2014-15 time frame about, you know, it was like $250, $260 for the average single family home, the impact, that will be starting to come to impact those tax bills now. So in the middle is some information about the construction contingency, how much has been used, information about change orders. These are items that have come up along the way, but we would invite you either to come to personally or to watch at home these school building committee meetings where we dive into these things a little more deeply. So, you know, just to illustrate, and this is the chart I referenced earlier about the debt service, you can see how it kind of trailed up from FY21, which is the far left, where FY25, I'm not sure if this translates onto the screen, but it'll be sort of FY26 and 27 where we hit that full $8 million of debt service for the high school. So to talk a little bit about what's new and what's happening with the budget, because we have some very exciting changes that are happening to the budget document that we want to talk about, and sort of how the budget has evolved over time. Back in 2007, the budget, you know, was very much a line item budget. It had, you know, sort of lump sum totals for departments. You see the information here, 63 pages, didn't have much of an overview. And then over the course of sort of the next 10 years or so, the document was built out, there was more information included, the forecasts were built out, We developed our financial policies. We included sort of glossary appendix information for the public. Leading up to 2017, when we were, there is a national organization, the Government Finance Officers of America, that gives an award to communities that have budgets that meet certain set of professional criteria. That was the first time we won that award. But then what's happened over the course of time since then is, we've added information. It's become this, it's a great reference book. It's a communication tool to the public, but it's giant. And for someone who's new to municipal government, or maybe new to Lowell and just wants, it's really overwhelming, and where do you get started? And so over the last couple of years, and a lot of credit goes to Mr. Ball and in this initiative, we've tried to streamline that. And one of the ways we're doing that, in partnership with the ARPA office, because they use this tool for the ARPA dashboard, is applying a new software called Cleargov, and this sort of dashboard model to our budget book. And so we're hoping that when we roll this out in the next few weeks, that this makes it a lot more user-friendly, the data a lot easier to work with, people to drill down to, and that's something I just want to talk about a little bit. So you can see, this was the 2006 version of the budget. And we're moving to essentially a completely web-based budget model. It will print to a book because it's still important, I think, to have the budget books available for the counselors. They like to make their notes. They like to mark it up as they see fit, and that's perfectly fine. But for the public, we're going to have a full suite of tools available online that you can drill into the revenues, the expenditures, the department details, find out more about what the departments are doing. So we're very excited about this, and we hope that you will be too. So I want to talk a little bit about ARPA specifically, and I've included some data here about where we're at. I mentioned sort of the deadlines that are upcoming, and some of the things we're watching out for. So you may already know this, but the city was awarded almost $76 million, $75.9 million from the federal government in the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, back in 2021-ish, the summer of 2021. And so after that, we did an engagement with the community, a community process to get some input from the community. And after that, and City Manager Tom Golden met with a lot of the community groups, had this sort of listening session. We came back to the council with a revised plan that is sort of split out into the categories that you see up on the screen. So social impacts, a large investment in fire apparatus, neighborhood improvement projects. These are mostly park improvements that are you're going to see. They've been in design. We're going to see the construction phase coming very soon. Municipal building improvements, improvements to water and sewer infrastructure, economic development recovery, support for nonprofits, public health response, premium pay, program compliance, which is more sort of admin overhead, and then revenue replacement, which was one specific category to help the general fund sort of bounce back from some of the revenue loss that occurred during COVID. Mr. Flynn is here if there are any specific questions about ARPA, but we're spending, to date, we have, and this is through, I think, February, but we've committed almost $37.5 million. We expect another 25 to be committed, and so we're working on that available number to bring that as close to zero as we can before the end of this calendar year, so that hopefully we don't have to return any of these funds to the federal government. We can put them all to use and get Lowell on the recovery from COVID. So, thank you for listening and for coming tonight. We want to hear from you all. Question and answer. City manager's here, assistant city manager, ARPA, myself, Mr. Ball. Happy to answer any questions. So please.
I do.
Yeah, please.
So the reason I came here.
If I could, I'm sorry, but they asked that maybe, does this work like this? Or?
It's not even working.
It's not working. Okay. All right, well, just shout. I'll repeat the question.
I'm sure.
All right.
Alright, so, for the places that are like near UMass Lowell, that is residential parking,
Mm-hmm.
they started charging where you have to get the little permit, so nobody parks in front of your home.
Mhm.
That used to be $10 a year for I don't know how many years.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden now, it jumped to $120.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why they're making, like, that's a huge jump over 120%.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is that happening? Why is that falling on us when you get, I understand that there's a cost to get the metal placard for the first time. I understand maybe charging more the very first time you sign up,
Mm-hmm.
but pay $120 for a little sticker that says the coming year, that makes no sense to me. And it's not my fault that now my street became a residential one and now I have to pay to say for someone not to park in front of my home.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it does not seem fair. And there's a lot of people having that problem. And I mean, we're in Lowell where there's a lot of low-income families and places and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, fights can break, you know, happen very easily. And why are they making that higher?
So, I'll talk a little bit about the process that we used to get there. This was one component of a comprehensive parking fee update. And as I mentioned before, the parking enterprise is sort of it's a fun, and I'll talk specifically about the finances of it. The parking enterprise is supposed to be self-sufficient. For many years, well, not many years, but the last 4 or 5 years, it has been running in a deficit. And so the city council has had to supplement it through using stabilization funds, et cetera, free cash. The ARPA revenue loss was one such way. And so, there were a number of components to this fee proposal. There was an increase to the pass cards that people use to park in the garages downtown. There was an increase to the on-street component in the downtown, parking at the meters. This was to offset the debt service of the new kiosks that were purchased. The third being this implementation and rollout of a neighborhood parking placard program. So we've always had the green and white signs. That never covered the cost, but there's more than just the cost of the sign itself. There's an administrative component of the department to administer the sign, and I'm not arguing with your concerns because they're very valid. But there was we were at this for a very long time, and so we had 3 public hearings over the course of 2 years or so, a number of subcommittees, and so it wasn't. It was very deliberate the way that it was derived and then implemented, but I understand your concerns, and I'd be happy to take that back to the parking director, but that was the fee that was chosen for the green and white signs.
Alright, just the fee that was chosen, that's,
So, it was approached on a cost recovery basis, and so, generally the parking enterprise trying to recover costs for all of the expenditures of the department, and, talk a little bit more about that. The parking enterprise is the cost of the employees in the parking enterprise, so the parking enforcement officers, the director, the business officer. It's the cost of the debt, it's mostly the cost of the debt service, which is the debt service on all of the garages. So the garage that we built most recently in the Hamilton Canal Innovation District, as well as the debt service for the kiosks. The ones that we had all kind of reached the end of their useful life very recently. And then it took a huge hit during COVID. And that's, so to sort of recover and to make the fund self-sufficient again, there had to be some revenue considerations, this being one component of it.
but why was it such a huge, not like a gradual increase? It was all of a sudden from 10 to 120, like that. And even I saw for senior citizens, it's like 60, but like some people are living paycheck to paycheck. So
Sure, and that's,
like it's just doesn't seem fair.
The decision, similar to the trash situation, that's been put off for so long. Neighborhoods you don't have to have one, but people are really set about parking in front of their house. And there has to be any type, we have to have some type of responsibility. If people don't want to, they don't need to. You don't have to have it. It's one of the pieces that people seem to want to have. And with the fact that the council looked at this is not an easy decision. Trash isn't an easy decision. Raising rates overall is not an easy decision. But when we're looking at approximately $5 million of taxes coming out of what I'll call the general fund to support a fund that's supposed to operate on its own.
So is the home tax, like property taxes, not cover part of that?
The property tax would cover, when the enterprise fund runs short, specifically we're talking about in parking, correct? The residential taxes, you take money from this to put it over there. And it's actually supposed to, it is supposed to pay for its own
I
purpose.
just wish that there was some sort of gradual change, and also like if you're getting hit, there was no like notice saying, like a letter saying, hey, this is going up, they expect you to be going to the city or.
We have
going
a
different
difficult
places.
time, and we're here to even ask for assistance with this. We try to push stuff out through Facebook, so any type of social media. We seem to push this out. This was over a year and a half of a discussion on the council floor, elsewhere, just all these discussions were happening. And with with newspapers gone, right? We're having a very difficult time from the city's perspective. We're trying everything we can. You're on Facebook, but now you're on X, and we're trying to hit every possible social media area to inform residents. But this was not something that was done, just one day. Matter of fact, there was a lot of pain, pushback.
I mean, for me, like, I had been waiting to renew mine because they told me that this year they were gonna do it online, you can renew online. Never
That's
got the notice for online
Right.
renewal, still not happening.
That's another thing.
And then when I was gonna go, it was like,
That
okay,
is
it's
coming.
120, last week it changed, it's 120 now
Right.
instead of 10.
But that's another thing
Just-
that we really need to do.
On
We
July
need to-
1st is
Yeah.
they'll be implementing the online component to the renewals. And that's part of the
And
software that
that's
they had to buy.
that's a software update that would be paid for through this.
The backstop of all of these things being taxes. And so, as the manager was mentioning, like if the parking enterprise can't pay for itself, then we all pay for it from our property tax bill. And so we try to set those fees for those things that the users use, commensurate with the services that they're receiving. But again, you're,
And why not consider something like a monthly payment, like, so for people, it's like, it seemed like 120 is too much, so why not every month pay $10 and you have your thing, I don't know, think of something like that. So that way for other people, it may
July
not
1st,
be.
well, July 1st, maybe we could consider that.
Yeah.
But once again, I'm
That's
just
what you're
being honest about this. July 1st, now every month, we'll be paying a fee of say 3%, right? Or whatever our fee is from it.
So make it
A lot of these
$10.30,
No, but-
cost to the consumer.
A lot of these discussions have been had, and we need to move on those in order to try to settle the tax rate. I know, it's not an eat, believe me, it's not.
oh great. I saw your hand in the back first.
Just out of curiosity, why, it seems a big part of the problem is it's such a big hit in 1 year for people. Why wasn't it a gradual increase over all these years that we've been falling behind?
Why wasn't it increased? I don't know. I mean, over the past 2 years.
Really?
Yeah. No, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, to shift gears for a moment, we haven't raised trash since 2008. I can't answer that question. I've been here
We're
for
expecting like a big hit, like the parking.
we have to move.
Over 100%.
We have to move things to what the actual need is. Trash today, the trash, I may have misspoke, trash is $5 million.
5 million, yep.
My apologies. Trash is $5 million. So think of it as the parent company, or a parent, right, has a child, which would be the enterprise account, and when that fund doesn't fill the need, the overall government, right, the parent, if you will, needs to backfill it. We're trying to stop that from happening, where water and wastewater, for the most part, are paying, everybody that's paying right now for water and wastewater, and I want to say for the most part, is paying its own way. Our parking fund as well as our trash fund are not doing that. And to answer that, I don't have the answer for that. Sure, Ryan?
Yep, so I guess in contrast to the first few folks, I'm in favor of the increase to the placard. I think that the Parking Enterprise Fund needs to be more self-sufficient. It's been operating at a loss for many years. I have two questions as it pertains to the Enterprise Fund. Number one of the components, in addition to the residential placard, was the street parking. That was supposed to increase, with the high zones were 250 to 150. I just parked right outside of, I don't know, Blue Tala, Mill City Barbecue, and I paid $150 per hour. I prepaid for 2 hours for $3. So I don't think that fee has gone into increase yet. So my question is, when will that happen and why hasn't it? And number two, in the slideshow that you presented, there was about $8 million left in ARPA funds that haven't been encumbered, that I believe need to be encumbered by this year, expensed in '26, but encumbered this year. Can any of that, or is there any discussion to use some of that to maybe offset some of the subsidy the general fund is providing, the Park and Enterprise Fund?
We've done that. Oh, sorry. Go right ahead.
So, both very good questions. Number one, I don't know specifically. So the ordinance passed just recently and was effective immediately, so could have been put into place, but I would expect there's some technical thing that has to happen that probably hasn't happened yet.
So from a technical standpoint, you'll notice if you go around Saugus Arena tomorrow or even Saturday, there'll be a $15 charge, right? There'll be a $15 charge. And as much as I think this is easy, going into the computer and changing on these streets in this zone for $15, that's a trick. It's, you know, and our folks are learning that. So tomorrow, if you happen to attend UMass Lowell's graduations, one of the pushbacks, one of the problems that we've had over years past is it lasts a tad longer than 2 hours, right? Well, because of special parking, you'll be able to pull up, park outside for $15. That also is going to happen in and around the Lowell Memorial Auditorium, where we normally had free parking. And everybody knows that we're all Lowellians, we know where to park, especially on weekends and things of that nature. But when we have an event at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium, let's be honest, when you go to Boston, you pay something, right? When you go to an event someplace, you pay something. That is coming. When will that be I would probably say soon. But it is not as easy as I was talking. The only reason I know this is because I was talking with Sean and our parking folks. They're working out how to actually get that done. But tomorrow's not the first time. Around the football games and things of that nature, that one's easier than raising $1.25 to $2.50 to the high zones, because we're still looking at what are the high zones. We actually want to move forward with the actual information over. I think Terry was saying, Sean, 3 months. I think it was a 3 month. Yeah. He wants to look at 3 months where is the red zone or the high zones.
There's a requirement in the ordinance that there's a 3-month look-back period. And so in order to, I think maybe you could set it once, but in order to change from a high zone to a low zone, right, or vice versa, there needs to be sort of a 3-month look-back analysis that was written in, so that it's not changed ever, sort of by whim. Your second question, though, about ARPA and its ability to subsidize the parking enterprise is a good question. So there was, of the 76 million, 10 million of it was revenue replacement, as I mentioned, and that's really the only unrestricted ARPA funding that there was. The others, any other expenditures from ARPA had to be used for a specific purpose outlined in the legislation for economic recovery, or there's a number of them enumerated in the federal law. So the city did use round numbers, $8 million. Some of it was used to replenish revenue loss in the general fund, parking, water, sewer being the others. There's still $2 million left, which could be used for parking, but it's the only unrestricted revenue that we have. And so we've been waiting strategically to see if there's any other projects that are ready, shovel ready, that we can encumber. And so, I mean, it is still an option that's on the table, but likely it'll be used for projects that otherwise wouldn't have been eligible for ARPA because of their use.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I think it's the simplest approach to basically, with the tax levy being where it is, 1.7, 1.8 being 1%, we still have that. We could take it from 3.5 down to 2.5 to the residents by simply pushing that button. So I think obviously it's something that needs to be considered.
That's a good point. Please.
I just want to circle back to one of the important concepts from your earlier slides. You had referenced transparency and accountability, but we didn't really get into what kind of measures are in place during the budgeting process to consider those. My specific concerns is things like political influence. When you say there's a 100 or 800-page document that has the budget, John and Jane Q. Public generally can't read 800 pages. It's not going to happen. So are there ways to quickly recognize where maybe coordination with OCPF, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, to see who is making donations to political campaigns that are winning projects in the city, where might political influence be happening? Again, not to say anything nefarious is happening, but the better we understand that, the better we actually know if this is where our money should be going.
OCPF does a really good job. If you've had an opportunity to go to OCPF, you can look at any candidate and say where, who's donating to that candidate.
You can,
Yes.
but again, I'm asking specific to the budgeting process. Does anyone in the city actually look at OCPF when these contracts are happening? If I go into that 800-page budget,
Well,
is there anything in there that discloses
a
things
lot
of
of the
that nature?
contracts that we do would be under 30 days.
Right, and every contractor that's awarded a contract
Right.
through procurement, and this is a state law, has to sign a non-collusion form as well as several other certifications, many of which certify that what you're indicating has not happened. And that's sort of written into the state procurement laws, whether it's Chapter 149 for vertical construction or 30B for supplies and services. And so it's our procurement office, sort of on a case-by-case basis that vets those things out, and then sort of the state oversight regulatory agencies like the Inspector General, they're the ones that would, if anybody were ever suspicious that something like that were to happen, they're the sort of watchdogs of those kinds of things. I mean, in the budget, we very generally talk about expenditures as they're budgeted, not necessarily. You can look at actuals in terms of gross totals, how much was spent on a certain type of thing, but the budget isn't necessarily a list of what the money was spent on. But there are other sources online if that were something you were interested in drilling into. There were several other hands. Yes, in the front, sorry.
We've had a lot of years of low inflation and very low interest rates. And now we're clearly at a very, very different time. And we've probably been a little bit lulled to sleep almost with the low interest and low inflation. And now I'm sure you process, and as money gets spent during a year, the budget year, and certainly the 2025 year coming up, how is that really stressing what you're doing? How much worry and how much impact is there with the new interest rates and the inflation that's hitting everything and everybody?
Yeah, great. I mean,
That's-
I worry about this all the time. This keeps me up
It's
at
gonna be
night.
very difficult.
It is, and I guess, specifically, when the city is subject to the same inflationary pressures that we all are at home. We buy a lot of gas. We light our facilities, so we pay for electricity, we pay for heating oil, and anytime those commodities increase in price, we see a corresponding increase in the budgets to pay for those things. As it relates to interest rates, I think about interest rates on borrowing money, and that has been something that, you put it perfectly, that for a long time we were borrowing money for nothing. Especially on a short-term basis, it would be like a 0% interest. And now, and again, I used the example of the high school. I think the bond that we sold most recently was like 4%, which sounds great, if you got a mortgage at 4%. Well, maybe not compared to a few years ago, but that's a lot of interest. And so it's something that is, it's a good point. It's something we're concerned about. We watch the economy, but that's why we're very interested in our reserve position and our credit rating, because those things can help mitigate those pressures on interest rates. There's not much we can do about commodity prices in the economy. I shouldn't say it like that. We have some programs through procurement where, we're able to, because we're such a large corporation, buy electricity at a better rate, municipal aggregation. We the city is on the aggregation rate. And so, through the sustainability division, we're able to make savings by energy initiatives. So those are the kinds of things that we try to use to balance those pressures in the economy. But excellent question. It's something that,
You have to manage the budget very differently than you did.
right, it is an entirely different strategy than it once was. Sir, in the back.
So I have 3 questions, or 1 comment, 2 questions. So the proposition 2.5, I don't understand the access levy capacity. So if you're not going to the full max and you have a remaining, do you do that later down the line, or is there a time frame that you can levy the difference?
Good question. There's no timeline, and the Department of Revenue keeps track, as do we, but through a set of annual reports that we submit to them and that they keep track of, the Department of Revenue at the state level, we always know what that number is, and so, we check. I didn't get into the whole process of setting the tax rate, which is a process that happens in the fall every year with the Department of Revenue, but, they know how much is there, and so if we wanted to, we could tax in excess of the 2.5% limitation, but it's always there. It doesn't go away so what I didn't mention before, but is relative to this, I think recently we've heard a lot about towns, especially, in our geographic sort of neighborhood, that have needed overrides or debt exclusions. Those are things you might have heard about in towns, and that's what happens when a town gets to that limit. They still can go above it, but in order to do that, it requires a popular vote, and so that's something that gets put on the ballot. I think of Westford may have had one, Drake, so a number of our surrounding communities, and it's often to pay for X, Y, and Z, so maybe funding for the school department or the police department, and so it has to go to a vote. Lowell has, certainly is not as long as I've been here, ever been in that kind of situation because of the amount of excess levy capacity that we have, but it's a figure that both we internally and then the State Department of Revenue keeps track of.
So back in 1980, right, Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts set a tax levy for 351 cities and towns.
Right.
And say it's $100. So every year, it can go to 102.5, so on and so forth. Every single year. You could follow it from 1980 to 2025, and you would see it's gone up 2.5%. Where the levy, where the excess comes in is, let's just say in 1981, Lowell decided to not raise any taxes, right? So that 2.5, that $2.50, just went over to the side. We're not taxing it, it's just sitting there. $5, $7.50, all the way up. So with their excess levy capacity today, what we have here in the city is because throughout the years, maybe back in 2008, I'm drawing the trash analogy, right? $125, we haven't touched it. That stays there. This tax levy, and I'm hoping to always say this, we have that money in the future. Other towns around us, they've always gone up by 2.5%. So therefore, they don't have any room. They're up against their ceiling. They'd have to go for the override.
No, I understand. I think my question is more, so in an example, when we give a 1% increase, and so that means 1.5 is not levied.
Mhm.
Can we do 5 years later, do 3?
Yes.
That one?
So
So that's a range.
The levy limit increases by 2.5% automatically as an operation of law. And so if you tax less than 2.5%, and then less than 2.5% again and again, that's how that grows, but it's always there.
So theoretically, $12 million.
$12 million.
$12 million in excess. But you can look at it this way: the city of Lowell could be bringing in $12 million more of revenue if we tax that $12 million. Oh, and that's been something that's been built up over the years.
No,
Not
I
that we're
understand.
going.
Because I think that was more of a question. So you could be saved as a rainy day
And we're not
fund
doing
for
that.
another year.
It is viewed, that's a sort of
Yep.
interesting point that your question leads me to, that Standard & Poor's, the rating agencies view it as a reserve. And so that, because communities can tax that, they see it as somewhat of a reserve. I mean, it's not cash in the bank that you can access, but, you do have the ability to get that revenue in needed in case of an emergency or something like that.
So my other question I have, and it's going to lead to a comment, looking at the budget expenses, I'm really shocked or surprised that the human and health services are so low, 8 million. And, and I think, when we talk about, because I live in downtown, I see homelessness, I see substance use, and I see a lot of, health and human services projects that can happen. Why it doesn't happen is beyond me, but neither here nor there. And I think, and Manager Golden, I can talk to you offline, to be more proactive. A couple years back, I reached out to the different committee hearings, never found the right one. Every one I've went to is always something else. I think I went one for licensing, for tattooing, wasted a whole hour. And thinking this is something where,
Maybe at the Board of Health?
well, yeah, because I think there's multiple. And when I called the city, try to ask which meeting is which, couldn't get an answer.
We can talk offline, but hunger home, yes, we got that.
Yeah, and so, but back to the budget, how, because this
So-
is a mission, how can that be increased
Yeah.
or how can that be offset?
Well, one, it's relative to, we spend so much money on education and so much money on these other categories. Relatively speaking, it is a small amount, for sure. And it is a significant challenge in the community. Health and human services encapsulates a lot of things that people, believe are really important, arts, culture, as well as human services, the health department, the senior center, veterans affairs, recreation. Those are all sort of lumped into that category. The one thing that maybe is misleading by the figures is that we're talking about the general fund. So leading back to my discussion about the fund types, a lot of that is funded by grants, and those show separately. Those we think of them, and technically they're special revenue funds, but ARPA is a grant. The money and the health department is very successful. That's a very good point. Very successful at securing grants from the state or the federal government, as well as in the planning and development department. The city, because of the nature of our socioeconomic makeup, we get a lot of entitlement grants from the federal government through the Community Development Block Grant Program, Emergency Shelter Grant Program, HOME, HOPWA, the sort of alphabet soup of federal funding. Those expenditures related to those grants are for mostly human service categories, and so the money that the city, a lot of times we're a pass-through to nonprofit organizations like CTI, CBA, etc., Boys and Girls Club. Those are from federal sources and sort of don't reflect in that number. Those are for those departments of city personnel and expenditures made by the city department. So it's not all that we spend on those services, but the grants is sort of the short answer.
So CDBG grants, for instance, we were talking about this today, we'll be reaching out to the community in regards to how we can better spend CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. We're going to be reaching out to folks, hopefully to do a survey monkey type situation, to find out where should we be spending the CDBG money, the ESG monies, so on and so forth. And CBA, CTI, the homeless, Middlesex Street Smock Shelter, everything like that. That's not necessarily in our budget, but it's, I'd like to think we assist in every opportunity we can.
There are a couple of documents that you can put your hands on that would give you a better picture on how much, where it's going, what it is, etc. And those are, every year we have an audit that's performed. So one is, it's called the CFA, the Schedule of Expenditure of Federal Awards, that we put on, it's under the city auditor's website. But there's also the annual action plan, which is a requirement. It's what leads up to the CDBG home HOPWA appropriation by the council. Those kind of outline where all those funds are going and what they're for.
Yeah, so I guess my understanding, so the budget expenses is only looking at the taxes and the revenue that the city does not look at the grants. So this is not the overall budget.
For the most part. I mean, there are some,
That's not budget.
yeah, there's some,
That
yes,
might be
for the most
201
part.
for you.
Yeah.
No.
Very good question, though.
Yes, so to me, a budget is a little bit of like a moral document, right? We put the money on issues that we think that are important for our community, right? I just want to make an invitation to you guys, all the ones wearing how you call this? A necktie. Please, could you please accept an invitation from me? I pay for your coffees and your pastries. I'm gonna take you to where I go every day to get my coffee, where I go every day to get my meat, to go my milk. And please, at the end of that 1 hour that you are going to dedicate to me in my community, please tell me at the end of the hour if that area is not in dire, in absolute help. It's literally a Walking Dead situation going on. Please come have a coffee with me. Let's go grab a coffee. At the end of the coffee, you guys, at the end of our conversation, you guys are gonna be like, you are right. You are right. This needs to be changed once and for all. And then we can allocate all these CBGs, TBDs, PAQs, all of these beautiful acronyms towards the solution, because we really have a school on top of a homeless shelter. And if you come with me, I'm going to show you what people do in the middle of the day, so kids can see from the school. Please come with me. Anytime you pick it, or we go, and then I need to
exactly what
see.
you're talking about. We go there, and I'll gladly go with you.
Fantastic. I take that. It's on camera. We're
It's
going to
on
walk
camera.
around.
I don't doubt that he'll take you up on that.
You're going to see the situation.
I can guarantee you, I've been there.
At the end of the day, you're going to go and say, hi, guys, this place needs a
Before
solution.
the end of the day,
It's
Sean.
literally an intersection of a street, okay?
Before the end of the show, we'll
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Please.
Oh, because I wanted to say, because it looks like the money is there, but it's not really, I think it's the conversation. It takes a nervous guy screaming across there to see if but this is important for us guys. We pay, she is paying more money and increase on, the more that we pay, you understand this, the more that we pay, the more that we're going to ask for you guys, right? You understand that,
Of course.
okay? You're not going to be giving us a
We're
break.
trying to change
We're not going to
things,
give you
so-
all our eyes are on your work right now, and we all support your work because we like what you guys do. This is an extreme, a beautiful example that you've been trying to reach out, but we need to go the extra mile. All
I
right?
cannot wait to be walking.
Thank you so much.
Right back.
Okay, so, my question, and it could be very personal, but, when we purchased our house, we realized and became aware of what wetlands are. So there were some trees that needed to be taken down in the beginning. So the city came in and took those trees down. 20 years later, I just want to prune some trees. I don't want to take them down. I just want to prune them. If the city wants to take them down, that's fine. So we went to the Conservation Commission, and we have to pay $50 to get on the agenda. So we paid $50. The next step is, it has to be published in the Law Sun, which no longer really, not many people purchase that anymore, but $309 for it to be published in the Law Sun. And then, so I said, okay, if I pay all that money, are you gonna come in and cut down the trees? No, because the decision hasn't been made yet. So I'm gonna pay $359 and not know what's gonna happen? I mean, we just got a roof a couple of years ago. The trees are scraping against the top of the roof, especially when it's windy. And we can't prune the trees? I don't wanna interfere with the wetlands behind my house. I understand how important that is.
That's it.
But that, I mean, I just think that's totally crazy.
Is it in the state, you're right next to the state forest, right?
Well,
Sean.
yeah, the safe forest on this
Sean, why
side,
don't we could, that's,
the
yeah.
safe forest on this side, but behind the house, I mean, I just
that-
wanna cut the limbs down, so they're not,
If you get trees hanging over your property line, you
Yeah.
can cut them.
That's why I figure, let's take this
Go off your
offline,
property
we can
line.
figure it out.
Right.
You don't need approval from the conservation.
Well,
well, I already
it's a
paid
state
$50
forest, so
and-
I just wanna make sure we take this offline. and figure
Okay.
this out.
But it's the plan.
all right,
Yeah, it's
The plan
it's a
is
state
for
forest.
yeah.
That's your
Putting it
instance.
into the newspaper is, something mandated, but
It's a state law.
It's a state law.
unfortunately.
But
that's what
let's
it
take
said.
this particular piece, because I believe that, obviously,
Okay,
Mr.
so I'll-
Machado's been doing that as well, so.
But
okay,
even as a state law, you can actually go bring it to the legislator and you can change it. I mean, laws can change, so
of
I don't
course.
think just because it's laws.
anyway,
State does not own your
Anyway.
airspace.
Oh, no, I'm saying just because it's state law doesn't mean you
So,
can't have that.
that's what I'm saying, I don't know where we'll,
okay, so I'll
I don't wanna
talk
be
to him.
giving-
I'm all set, yeah,
yeah.
I'll talk to him,
Sean,
yeah.
yes.
So my question, kind of touching on some transparency stuff, I think this is a great session to be able to, have some transparency. In contrast to other towns around us, our budget is largely made up of state subsidies that come to us. So I understand that that takes a little bit more time to ensure that that's done through the Beacon Hill process before it gets to us. Maybe Chelmsford has such a very small percentage. But why can't the budget process be shortened so that it can be released to the public, and maybe we have 1 month to look at this 800-page document and be able to give our feedback at a public hearing, as opposed to just 2 weeks? I'm one of the people who will skim through the entire 800-page document. I think 2 weeks is a little bit tough. How can we bring that down so that we have more time as a community?
Well, I think you just stated one of the pieces. I mean, the governor's budget, I know I've worked with the governor's budget, the House budget, the Senate budget. The Senate consistently, and I say this in a good way, I was never in the Senate, but they're in the catbird seat. They get to see that last months of revenue. And you can already tell some of the revenue would come in a positive manner through April. So they're kind of increasing some spending. When we're looking at, when the finance team looks at this, every $1 million counts. And that's, believe me, if the House and the Senate started to release their budgets earlier, in years past, they did do a resolution. They did a joint resolution, which kind of has slipped a little bit. That would be a little bit easier. But the big issue that I would have with putting something out where we're not a little bit firm on or really confident, the minute we say we're giving $100,000, and I'll use that low figure, everyone's going to see it as that we're getting that 100 grand. If that finally, at the end of the day, after the conference committee, if that's cut, we got to go back and cut that 100,000. That's why we're trying to be out here in the forefront to take the ideas, take the interest, find out what people need, and move that way. I would love to. You would love for this to be done.
Yeah, I will.
Believe me,
But I
right.
think one of the challenges has been what is somewhat, we use computers and advanced tools to put the budget together, but this thing that I'm talking about, Cleargov, that hopefully you get a chance to look at, I think it's gonna do that. It's gonna push back our timeline. And hopefully, as a goal over the next couple of years, obviously we have information that we need to wait for, but we're gonna be able to push this out faster, and in a way that's more transparent and user-friendly. So that's a goal of ours.
That's been a goal we've been moving, especially when 2 years ago when they handed me the 800 pages. I said, this is
Yeah.
a little.
Last year, it was a little particular because we had an incident
That's right.
in April that happened that cut us.
Something about computers.
So this,
Could you explain the thinking behind keeping the reserve in the tax levy versus letting it incrementally, bit by bit, eating into that and converting it into a cash reserve, which seems to me
We would
would
have
be
to
better.
raise that money. We would be increasing taxes. So we would increase taxes to the tune, it's 12 million.
so every 1% is 1.7.
1.7.
Yeah, I'm saying over time,
Right.
over
Sure.
10 or 20 years. It just seems to me
10
that,
million savings.
I don't know how many years.
14. But sort of liquidating the
So, yeah,
Yeah, because I'd
excess
rather-
levy capacity.
I would
I'd
love you to
rather
come
have-
and say that.
I'm not sure, yeah.
But we have $14 million currently right now in what I'll refer to as a savings account.
Mhm.
That's 14 million liquid cash that we have in a savings account. We also have, when people start to push back and say, it is difficult. There's no question about this. It's not something that any of us want to do. But we also have that $12 million that we have not taxed that we could. So I see what you're saying.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not that comforting, and I'm not sure I'm thinking about this right.
No.
But it seems to me it's not that comforting to know that if we get into a pinch, you can come and tax me. I'd rather know you had the money in the bank
Hmm.
for the pinch.
Well, we have 14 million live
Especially if it's all
cash.
gonna come at one time.
Right.
He's not running for office.
Yeah, no, the $12 million is stuff that we could. The tax levy, that, we could go up that, up another $12 million if that was the will of the body, will of the residents. Let's be honest, okay? I'm hoping people are starting to see the difference in what our roads are looking like, okay? We were spending approximately $3.5 to $4 million prior to me getting here. Now we're spending, we haven't even finished that yet, but
for this year.
Visits. But we're spending 11, 12 million dollars per year. And I would use, I would give you the example of a street that is approximately 200 yards long, that we had to go from beginning to end. That 225 yards cost us $485,000. So spending $3.5 million wasn't cutting it. Spending now 10, 11, 12, and 13, and there's a reason that those numbers move around. I'm hoping people are starting to see what is happening. I believe in the next year to 2 years, and that's all happening because of tax money. That's not something that we figured out one particular day, and we're just not telling anyone. This is tax revenue that we're increasing, all of this stuff. My goal is that when you see the revenues go up, that you're seeing the services follow back. You're seeing that the roadways are getting better. You're noticing that we have a cleaner downtown. The things that you shouldn't notice, things are being painted. The things that you shouldn't notice, bridges are being painted that we own. There's a lot of things that we own and we don't own, but we're still trying to make this a better community, a better place. Right out here, Middlesex Street, John, it's a mess, right? When you go out and take a look at this, it's been a mess for years. I'm hoping by September of this year. But all of these local paving pieces, this is only one aspect of the budget that we're going after. But it's because the people are allowing the council, allowing myself to increase, let's call it, increase the tax, because there's no way to go from that 3.5 million in expenditure for horizontal construction to where we are today in the 10, 11, and 12 million dollars. And that's kind of, I think we deserve to have that. We deserve to have nice roads. We deserve, this isn't a pitch. You guys know that they appoint me to do this stuff. Some of this stuff hasn't been touched for years. And it's terrible. And I hear you. And I'm not, not trying to placate. I'm not trying to make this easy. This is not, these decisions about raising revenue, raising taxes is not easy. But we want to make sure we're doing it in the right place. And that's the horizontal or the paving piece. That's one of the easiest ones for me to, because everybody here has walked here or drove here. We just did a study on our sidewalks. We are $65 million behind in sidewalks. Now, we're not doing it tomorrow, but it sets a goal of where this city, where we need to go. Everybody has heard about the problems within our school departments, with our schools, right? But Mr. Machado here, with Mr. St. Cyr and the school department, I wish I could tell you, I wish I had it on me, the amount of new heating systems, new HVAC systems, and it's because of a couple of things. It's because of monies from ARPA, but it's also because of money in the capital piece. Your taxes in capital are going into those schools. What we're doing this year, and what we just put forward for our fire department. The fire department, it was at one time, it was at 6 million when I first got here, and the council and myself and CFO, we decided to move it up to 10 million. We're gonna have 10 new trucks. Not only 10 new trucks, because we need them. These trucks are $1 million, $1.2 million a pop. For a ladder truck, why do I know this? $650,000 to $700,000 on an engine. The next piece that we're doing, which hopefully is before us now, we have a plant, OPM, thank you. See, this is why you have good people around. But we have an OPM that is going to be signed up to go through all of our fire stations to make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. We already know they're not. We already know that even in our own city hall, we had one bathroom in the basement. Finally, all the bathrooms, male, female, are all going to be completed, where ADA accessibility is an important factor. It's going to cost $1 million. We didn't find the $1 million. You guys allowed us to do it. You allowed us to do it through increasing fees, taxes, and things of that nature. So that's why I'm here. These two know the budget inside and out. It's really a privilege to work with them, because they understand, they know where the finances are, they know how they come in, but trying to look forward to find out what we want our city to be. We want our city to have culture. We want our city to have arts. We want our city to have good, clean parks. We want our city to have sidewalks. We want our city to have roadways. We want our city to have clean schools, safe firehouses, police departments, all of that. And this is the toughest thing, raising revenue. And a lot of that is what I've been doing, and this is on me. I've asked the council to trust us on this. And I think that over the next year, 2 years, you're gonna really see something visually within our roadways. And just know that if you're looking at roadways and you're seeing a change, then the next time you're in City Hall, you'll see that change in that bathroom. Right? It sounds small, but it's not. It's important stuff that I think we've neglected. And I'm not blaming anybody in the past, because someone's gonna blame me later on, right? Different times, different decisions were made, and you just never know what was going on. Most of you know I was elected for 28 years. I made a whole boatload of errors, right? That's how it works. But we need to keep the ball moving forward, and I think we're doing that. We're doing that because you're allowing us to do that. So I thank you, and I know I feel so bad about that one. That was the tough one. Trash and everything else is difficult as well. You know, I'm not done.
Well, I have a comment or question about parking. So I also was one of the people that supported like the increase, but at the same time, why was the decision made to increase it immediately? Because the budget for 24 is already set, so we knew that there was going to be a deficit. So why didn't it wait until next year's budget, starting July 1st, to give people enough notices? Because I don't think, I mean, most people know that it was being undercharged.
Yeah.
And I think that all of it should have been implemented at the same time with a new budget cycle, because that's actually when you're really projecting your budget for the next year. So that's like one of my comments, because I do think that Councilor Janice also brought that up. And he actually talked about a lot of condo associations, they have annual budget. So I wonder if that should have at least given people opportunity and talked about it and got information out to people. So that's one of my comments. And the other thing is, I care a lot about enterprise funds, and enterprise funds should pay for itself. And none of the enterprise funds really, it has a huge deficits every year. So is there any thoughts about getting rid of enterprise funds and just, have the budget rather than showing such a big deficit? Because, I mean, parking, every last few years, $3+ million. Sewer, I see the costs increasing by like $2 million every year. I don't know how you can sustain that. And I've seen the projections for like 5-year projections on all those funds, and some funds, are trying to, fit it, looking at the increases, but there are other funds, some funds doesn't have any kind of projection and it's just showing deficits. So is there any, thinking through that? And my other question is about trash. There's going to be a new contract and the cost is, so you're going to have even bigger gap. And if a lot of it is the contamination on the recycling, shouldn't city invest a little more on people and have more inspections and, maybe figure out how to make sure that trash aren't contaminated as much?
We're in that currently as we speak.
Yeah, I know when Gunther was around, he used to do a lot of education.
We are doing a lot of fining. Mr. Machado hears about it. When people are getting fined, and actually we're now twisting barrels of them, so they won't get picked up.
We have Chris Sullivan, who's in Gunther's old position, and the inspectors have really stepped up enforcing that. We're going to get a report really soon on how many fines we've issued for contamination.
We're not trying to fine people. We really don't want to.
Yeah, but sometimes you have
It's
to,
an educational
especially if
piece.
It's
it's
an educational
costing.
piece.
It's costing the city so much money.
But to kind of answer the question or overall, we're trying to stop, once again, if you want to think of and I hate to say parent, but it is the city is the parent operation, right? We're trying to get the enterprise accounts to operate the way they're supposed to and to charge what they're supposed to. Water, wastewater are in good order.
For now.
For now.
I mean, there are most certainly challenges, if I could maybe just add,
Wastewater.
one thing being specific to wastewater, and I'll bring this back around to why there's enterprise funds, maybe a sort of short history as to back and forth we've done. But, it allows us to, as I said before, set the fee commensurate with the total expense in a way that we may not be able to account for it as accurately if it were just part of the general fund. With the mandates from the Environmental Protection Agency, the consent decree that the city is under, the latest consent decree, we've been under a consent decree since the 80s for combined sewer outflow. It allows us, for a number of reasons, to accurately allocate those costs to the communities that are serviced by the regional wastewater utility. And so the wastewater utility provides services to Chelmsford, Tingsboro, Dracut,
And they pay.
et cetera, as well as to set the fee for those institutions that don't pay taxes. And our friends and partners in the community, and I'm a UMass Lowell graduate, but they're a large user of water and sewer, and to be able to charge the fee to them for those services, enterprise fund accounting is the best way to do that. We've found over time, and two particular examples, one being the arena. When the city owned the arena, we ran that as an enterprise fund. It was sort of the means by which we were able to, and this is a little bit before my time, but very early in my tenure with the city, come to the conclusion that it was sort of a losing operation, and the partnership and the deal that was struck with the university to transfer hands. I don't think that without the enterprise fund accounting, the city would have been able to sort of have a good grasp on what that meant financially for the city, which turned, in my opinion, my personal opinion, was a good thing for the city overall. The auditorium being another. We used to run that as an enterprise fund, and it just didn't work. The auditorium is, it's a public building. We have a private management firm that books the shows, manages the facilities. We tried to run it as an enterprise fund, and it didn't work. It needs a subsidy. It's something that I think we can all agree, we need the auditorium. It provides great culture and life to the downtown, great shows. So in some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. Before we had water and sewer as enterprise funds, going back 2006 and 2005, it was a recommendation of the Department of Revenue that we do that in a sort of comprehensive financial management review that they did, and so it works. But as with everything else, there are sort of pluses and minuses, and being able to forecast what the rates are going to need to be is something that the enterprise funding accounting allows us to do and to communicate to the public.
I mean, but it's almost like a department, so, you can still do that without it being an enterprise fund. Because you know what your revenue is gonna be, like, depending on what rate you're setting. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you for putting together the presentation and for the listening session. I think it's incredibly informative to get an insider look into the city's budget. It's certainly my first time listening to a presentation like this, so thanks very much. To your point about the city's operating costs exceeding the revenue for trash and recycling, you mentioned that you'll be proposing some solutions to the city council in their June 4th meeting. Are you able to share what those proposals will look like, first of all? And then I have a second parter for the city manager. What is your office and or the city council doing to concretely address recycling contamination? Is it educating residents? Because I feel like that, like in recent memory, I don't remember ever receiving a flyer about like Recycling 101 or that this was even an issue in the first place, because I recently learned about it when I finally got behind the paywall for the Little Sun. So yeah, I think like there just needs to be more push on education. Are you also like reconsidering the contract with Waste Management? Because they're sort of the reason why your fines are ballooning into millions of dollars a year.
Sure,
Yeah.
I can speak to some of it, I can't speak to all of it.
Right.
Okay, so the first issue, we are going out to contract for our services. So I'd like to stop the conversation there, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
And we are talking about a whole host of issues that we would like to see them, the new organization or the organization, tackle. With the new person that we've just brought on over in recycling, I think you can see a big difference. It's been a challenge for us to keep people there. Something that wasn't mentioned earlier today, when I first got here, we had a lot of openings, a lot of people that were not working in the city or for the city. We have just recently completed a wage adjustment to keep people here, to get people to want to apply. I can honestly tell you from day one, when we would put jobs out, we get zero people would apply. Then sometimes one, and then you know we didn't have a choice at some points. So after the wage study was completed, the wages that were increased. Now that I can say I could go on there and when we put a job out, we get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. So now and once again, thank you very much, because the residents allowed us to do this. We've brought up the pay. So now we're bringing up the expectation. So you should see a lot more communication when it comes to recycling. I throw the challenge to each and every one of you every time I speak in front of a group. The challenge of, where do you get your information? Is it Facebook? Is it X? Is it wherever? Because we're splashing everywhere we can, and we're still missing people. We're still missing people. And growing up, you had the Little Sun, and everything you wanted to know was there, right? And it's difficult. It's hard. Are you listening to CAP? What are you listening to? How are people getting their information? If you want to tell us, believe me, we'll be on it tomorrow. For the 5th largest city, we didn't have a communications department. We now do. 1.5 people. We're working it. 115,000 people. We've got 1.5 people. We're going to work it. But communications it's a huge challenge to all of us, and that recycling piece proves that. We know that. Once again, I'm not interested in finding people. I just want everyone to be able to do it the right way. Matter of fact, boys, if someone does something, mistake, let's work through it. It's not a big deal. But most of our contamination is happening over and over and over again in the same area, the same problems. We'll be talking to UMass Lowell. Hopefully we can get Massburg involved. There's a whole bunch of different ideas. But if you have any ideas like that, I'd be glad to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, like back in my college days, I did a lot of like canvassing for nonprofits and political campaigns. I don't think anything beats like a physical flyer that you get to
We're
people.
trying to recycle though. We're trying to get you to go to Facebook or
I really don't think social media is that effective for you to reach the people who really need to know the recycling 101.
I think
I don't think anyone has like bad intentions when they like throw wood or metal into like recycling bins. They probably think it is recyclable. Like I didn't know plastic bags aren't recyclable until 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I just think education is like so important, and like we're glossing over it a little bit.
If you look at the top of your green recycling bin, it's in Boston there, what you can put on there. Now, I can't see any of you right now. And I'll tell you, Sean and I were talking about this, about trying to update that even with a sticker. Only put this in here, just to kind of remind people. And that's something that we would need a group of college students or whoever just to go around on those particular days. Because I'll tell you, does anyone know what I'm talking about? On the front of your green? You've seen it? Eyes are better than mine.
I have an idea.
And also the requirements have changed a lot.
The requirements changed already.
A lot. Years ago, Gunther had a flyer that did go out to everybody, and it did say, you can put these items in, you can't put these items in.
Yep.
And it still hangs on a
No
refrigerator.
pizza box.
You can still
Who
get
wouldn't
it
take a
on the
pizza
website.
box?
Is it? Yes.
Yeah, because of the grease. You're right.
It's not easy.
I have an idea. competition between neighborhoods.
What?
People
Mr.
love
Machado?
competition.
Were you
Right?
talking to him? Because this is what he was talking about.
Competition.
Yeah.
And actually, the inspector's going out, which neighborhood gets the least amount of violation? And if we actually get.
No
that
taxes
as a
for you.
campaign- I have lots of good ideas, but I think you can get that out because everybody's gonna talk about it and it becomes a competition.
I swear,
And do
I think
that.
you're listening to Mr. Machado.
Maybe we should be talking.
Yeah.
Also, there are like recycling centers are very modern,
Yes.
like in the middle of the city right now, that you can put a few machines and
That's
you
kind of
go.
what we want, not what I'm talking about right
You don't, oh, okay.
now. Only because of everything we're doing. That's all.
Good.
Might be a little in the weeds, and I understand that you can't talk about it, but still building on this conversation with trash. Years ago, when I sat on the Lowell Sustainability Council, we were working with Gunther at the time, and he was strongly in favor of us potentially moving to a pay-as-you-throw, save-as-you-throw model, similar to what Worcester had done. Essentially, letting it be like any other utility. If you use it more, you pay more. If you create less waste, all right, again, in that sense, it's almost an internal competition of how low can you get your bill to be on a monthly basis. So I'm just curious if something like that is even still in the conversation.
I've talked to Chris about that. I've heard of it. I don't, I wouldn't throw it out, but
Essentially, it's like the purple bag system, but
Yeah.
it's all purple bags.
Sure. No.
Also, in big buildings where I live, we have like 400 units in the 3 different buildings. So I was doing the recycling, and then an employee of the building told me, "Oh no, don't worry, everything goes to the same bin." So I went to the office. Let me finish my story. I went to the building administered by Win, one of the biggest, and I talked to the people in the building, and I say, "Hey, by the way, Mary told me that you guys are not recycling, that everything goes to the same bin." I'm still trying to find Mary. I don't know where she is. She lost her job. It's funny, but it's sad because we were under the impression that we were recycling, and we are not. So please put some pressure on Win Properties, create a recycling center over there. We'll be happy to do whatever it takes. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Chris Sullivan came to our Highlands group last month, and he gave us a presentation, and I think he seems like a really good hire, very knowledgeable of that industry, understands the haulers, and he's probably going to be great as far as these contract negotiations go. His guidance, because a lot of people had a lot of questions on specific things, and Connor touched on how in the past recycling was free. It was we recycle more, it saves us money. Now recycling is a cost. And I think the guidance is kind of when in doubt, throw it out. We avoid that contamination expense. Maybe we recycle a little less, but when in doubt, throw it out. And that needs to be kind of the model going forward to save us money.
But the pizza box thing threw me off many years ago. I'm like, what? Yeah. But anyhow. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just wondering for the property taxes, how often do you evaluate the value of a building or a home or anything like that?
3 years.
So we do what are called interim valuations, where they're out, so they go out if there's a sale, they'll go out after the sale, and the assessors try to get neighborhoods in a more regular cyclical fashion. We're required by law every 5 years now. It used to be 3, they changed the law a few years ago. Every 5 years we have to do a full revaluation of the entire city.
What happened in...
Sue was still down there, so
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3 years ago
Yeah.
was the last reval. So a few more years before we have to do it again. Used to be 3, now it's 5, but we try to get interim valuations, we call them, more regularly anytime there's a sale or transfer of property.
And there is, people should know, if you feel as though your house has been overvalued, you can
Sure.
file that.
I mean, right, it bears mentioning sort of the abatement process. So there's a specific window under the law that opens after the issuance of the third quarter tax bill. You have up until the beginning of February, and that's when you can file if you have a statutory exemption. So if there's a number of classes under the law, if you're a veteran, if you're a disabled veteran, widows, widowers, seniors. Am I missing any?
I think that's it. I have a question on that real quick. The taxes, because I was trying to inquire from my parents, because I heard about if you're disabled, there is possibly discount
Yes,
taxes.
there is.
But when I called the office, they said that the owner has to be disabled. So like, let's say they have a child, like my brother is.
Child of the owner?
child of the owner, and they told me no.
You may
So
have to
I'm
be the
not
property
sure.
owner. So these are things that are set by state law, but.
And what's the age for seniors, because I know every place like that's like different, like sometimes 61,
Yeah, I think it's 62.
I don't wanna get, yeah.
But, Ellen Bordeaux,
Ellen
in the
Bordeaux.
assessors office, 978-674, come on, 4240. Or come in, E. Bordeaux, that's BRIDEAU.
Oh, But
They're wonderful, a wonderful office. They can help with any questions.
It's like I called over the phone and they're like, oh no.
But
it's
if you
not.
talk to Ellen, she'll definitely, I mean, you should be able to talk to
Ellen,
Ellen.
with an E.
We can give you
Yeah.
the name.
February is the deadline though under the statute, so you have to apply within that time frame if you have an exemption, or if you feel you've been overvalued, there's a process to submit an overvalue form.
And I want to let you know that there were about 75 or 80 last year.
Not many.
That filed. And after talking to Ellen, I think 10 filed. Because she explained the whole process. And people walked out of there actually not unhappy.
I mean, our city assessor who works in the finance department is excellent. She's, was the president for the state board of assessors. A great resource if anybody ever wants to, if this is the kind of thing that interests you, please come to City Hall. They're very knowledgeable and happy to help anybody with questions. 4200. 978-674-4200. Please.
I have two questions. One is, I know that for budget considerations ahead of that, I think it was June 4 open meeting, the roll forward plan was one of the three main considerations. I know there was a period of time where we submitted comments on that plan. Is that going to be made public so that we can see if all of those comments were?
Good question. So this past Monday, the planning board held their hearing. So there's a process. The city's required by law to have a master plan, and it's going through that process. There was a presentation that was given by the assistant city manager, Giovanni Baez-Rose, as like a preview, and then it went over to the planning board. The planning board had their hearing this past Monday. It's going to come back to the city council for a vote. That will happen.
With the planning board's
Recommendation, right. So that will happen in the next few weeks. And there will be a formal vote, and then it'll be put into action and sort of more formally incorporated into the budget as a guiding principle for our spending decisions.
Okay. And then, thank you. And then the other question I have is that we're really approaching this ARPA cliff. And there were, ARPA funds in large part were used for replacing lost revenue, but then it was also used to implement some really wonderful programs across the city in different sectors, and that now things are kind of on the chopping block, right? So you have some school programs, you have the city service fees that are being subsidized for all of our cultural festivals, and those are something that, if you see like a snapshot of the city, that the city really prides itself on all of these cultural offerings, but there was ARPA funds really supporting that, and now all of the folks that organize those are they're going to be shouldered with those costs. So that's not the only example, but I'm just wondering what are some strategies on your end for managing that gap that we're going to see from things that were started that you want to continue?
Some organizations have done it better than others. Some cultural organizations took it to heart when we had them sit down with Case to say, we can give you this year, but remember, this is going to tail off. And once again, I can only state right now that some have done it very well. They know exactly where they're heading. Others were trying to get started. Some of the cultural events have been trying to get started. We have a little bit more of a runway with this, so we're going to, but our piece of always saying, we're giving you this, but remember, we don't have a problem, at least from the administration standpoint. A lot of organizations would raise and spend it all. Well, we'll help you through ARPA to raise and save a little bit, try to raise and save a little bit. And some are doing an excellent job. Others we're still working with, but that's going to be that'll be a challenge. It definitely will be a challenge, but I think that the city will come through at the end of the day and be able to help, maybe not fulfill. We have a lot of people with a lot of great ideas, and we have a lot of ideas, but we need, the horsepower behind it. And a lot of our cultural organizations are dynamite with that. A lot of horsepower, a lot of excitement, a lot of movement, and it's quite frankly easy to help them. Sometimes, quite frankly, they didn't need us. They do such a great job. So we will have a challenge in 2027, no doubt.
I think there are some other, like Mosaic, some great organizations in the city that will need to pick up the mantle a little bit, but the city, there are some things that we've done with ARPA to supplement some of the festivals, namely that a lot of that money has been spent, but there are some things that haven't happened yet, namely some of our marketing initiatives, where we've used the sort of first few years of ARPA to ramp up. But we have a very exciting marketing initiative that'll be coming. We're going to encumber it. That's one that's most certainly going to be encumbered before the end of the calendar year, and we'll be able to spend that money after. And hopefully that marketing initiative, because I think we all, those of us that live in the city know how great Lowell is, but it's hard for us to get other people to believe what we already know, and this will help us reach out, and then that'll drive some people into the economy, help those festivals, to help those organizations become sustainable and run on their own. And that's to be seen in the next few years.
Do you know like that bridge that is in Middlesex, like by the Market Basket? When is that one, the one that's super old and falling apart?
Yeah.
When will that ever be replaced?
Broadway?
The one,
Rock Bridge. Oh, yeah, the Rock Bridge, it's a state,
No.
it is happening. That's right.
do we know when?
What's the date?
80% design right
Yeah.
now?
So it should be complete, well, I hate saying when it's gonna be
I know.
completed.
No, I know.
We're not in
When are
charge
they
of
gonna,
it.
when are they gonna start it?
We're not in charge of it, but it is moving forward.
Are you talking about the one on Broadway Street?
Not Broadway, like the one like, what's it?
Okay, all
The
right.
one that's like, that's Middlesex and it keeps going and that's like
Okay, we didn't talk about the raise grant, but there's a number of,
That one downtown, next to Macheris's.
no, I'm
That's
talking
the
about
one
the big bridge, so the one that's like way
That is-
after the boulevard.
Oh, that's a
After the
rock bridge.
boulevard,
Yeah, that's a rough one.
That big one.
That's temporary.
That's the temporary.
Also,
Which, by the way,
yeah,
is
the
safe.
temporary one from like 40 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Hasn't fallen yet.
It's fine.
You said you guys do like budgeting for like the parks, and I saw that you guys did like, or there was work done in the park in South Common by the STEM Academy, which is great. They paved, it was nice, great, but they decided like the benches are like this low for the sitting, they're super low, and they decided to put like rocks in that little area, and I started walking with the family recently. What I'm noticing is all the rocks now are in the walkway. It's like kids and people just kick it. That was like a terrible design and idea to put rocks there, because now it makes it a hazard for, kids bike riding, scooter, walking, running, whatever it may be. Now there's rocks all over the place. The South Common,
By the
yeah.
STEM
It's like
Academy.
the benches are like this low,
Yeah.
so like I see the older people when they sit down like have a hard time like getting up, which is
Older people like me.
anybody, to be honest. And it seems like it's just worse. And also the trash barrels, there should be more, because now, like, we went yesterday, it was full of trash all over the place. It was terrible. It was like not enough.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so like something like not just a barrel here and then like half a mile that way, another one. Like something a little bit more uniform.
So that's stuff that, if we're not walking South Common,
Right.
we can see it.
I mean, I figure out eventually, because like there's a lot of like the homelessness that they were talking about earlier too, a lot of that. And things
Friday
going
mornings, we
on.
have the whole crew over there,
Yeah,
going through the park, so.
yeah, something to look at, because it's very close to the Thornline Exchange that, and want to
Concerned
make it
about
look
the benches,
fancy and like pricey, right? So.
I'm concerned about the benches though, why are the benches so low?
No, I'm not joking, like go walk, they're like really low.
We'll take a look.
It's also very dark, and it also trash collects very fast and easy over there too.
So a lot of people live in
Yeah.
Other, yes, sir.
A question for Connor. I'm wondering if your office has had a chance to evaluate the Lowell Innovation Corridor or the Network Corridor. Like, have you been able to evaluate that, or is it still in early enough stages that it's?
It's very early. I mean, in terms of determining the impact to the budget, the taxes that would be derived from companies moving in, it is still very early, but we have a very close partnership with the Chancellor's office, the university administration, and
UMass Donahue Institute did
There is a study that was commissioned by the Chancellor's office to study the economic impact. I don't know that we have all of the
We
results
don't have all
from
all
it
the
yet, but
results.
that's what they do.
Yeah. UMass Donahue did if and when, well, let's say when. This is a very exciting time. You know, but taxes, you could talk $4 to $6 million, but that's a big, which one is it, 4 or 6, you know? So, we know it's gonna be obviously a positive drive for the area, the 10 acres that's over there. And it's been a real pleasure, real pleasure to work with Chancellor Chen on this. It's been great. We're just hoping that sooner rather than later. We've had a lot of, I think there'll be a few things coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Good. Looking forward to seeing it.
And I'm very excited. I mean,
exciting
Draper
time for us.
was the big one.
Yeah, I just, personally, I think it's great that, these things are being driven into the city. The back of my mind, I'm not a budget expert, but just have some concern that maybe, we're giving up a lot or, too much control to the university or private companies getting too good of a deal, but I still think it's exciting. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's all university land, and other than the dorm that's gonna be over there, everything will be paying taxes. Now, don't think for a second that there'll be TIFs involved and ties involved and tax incentives. The only place where tax incentives aren't needed or aren't warranted or don't happen is Cambridge. Cambridge and some of the areas out of in and around Boston. Any other city or town, we're pretty lucky that Draper, not lucky, we're good, but Draper had 3 choices and they chose it. So we're pretty excited about it. That's kind of one of those anchor tenants that I think in the next few weeks, and I wouldn't want to say 2 north of that, but there'll be other announcements that I know that are coming.
Cool.
So, it is 7:15. We also want to leave some time for individual discussion, unless anybody else has any other open discussion. I know there's some folks that want to tackle Sean. And Mr. Ball is here as well, if any financial stuff or
Of course.
Mr. Baldwin.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
all
very much.
so much.
And everyone, you gotta take a piece off.
Please have
You
some
didn't do
more
your
pizza.
part.